can we get our appropriate slide up? So if we go to the next one. So if you voted, congratulations. If not, you're about to lose your shot. Don't worry, we might do a hand poll afterwards or so. Given that, yeah. Oh, we're not doing the verdict right now. So can we get the next slide, please? Yes, there we go. It's a handsome young man. So there we go. Look. Shall we start off? First thing I want you all to notice is that you can see things gotten a bit serious, right? So it's a bit warm in here, isn't it? But I'm doing up my buttons because I'm wearing a Black Panther t-shirt underneath it, and I don't want to end up in the Daily Mail. I don't want Zack or myself to end up in the Daily Mail. Because go on the Panthers, and so I'm trying to protect our brother. So there we go. Look, ladies and gentlemen, please have your seats. Have your seats. We bought all of these snacks here, and our brother went out and bought popcorn too. That's a man who's serious about his physique. He is not messing with the Quality Street, the coconut stuff, or anything. He just wants his popcorn so he doesn't mess up his personal best tomorrow in the gym. So there we go. Respect to you, bro. Respect to you. Look, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very special night for us out here. Are we all back in the room? Are we all here? Are we good to go? Are we warm? Are we hot or so? Or we're ready for it. Let's just get into it. We've got an hour and 15 minutes before the good people of Rich Mix kick us out. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very special night for us at Uppity. We are delighted. This is a very special night. It's a unique sort of room. We're an edgy organization. We care about people. We do things that are somewhat unorthodox. There's ways in which politics is done, and there's ways in which politics is done as unusual. And I'd love to think that tonight is a night where those two worlds have collided. Not collided, have come together, converged. Uppity and the Greens. And it's an absolute delight that he could be doing anything right now. He could be anywhere in the world. He doesn't drive, he doesn't fly, so he wouldn't be anywhere. He would be on this island. So he'd be anywhere a train would take him to. Anywhere a train could take him to. So it could be anywhere in Europe, essentially, or maybe a bit further afield too. But he's here with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a gentleman I would call, a gentleman some would call the Starmer Slayer. Some would call Kemi's Kryptonite. Some would call Farage's funeral. But we call our brother. Please welcome the great Zack Polanski. Thank you, Zack.
Don't do a Black Panther t-shirt. Farage's funeral.
Welcome, Zack. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Welcome to Uppity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone, for having me.
Great for you to be here. Zack, let's swear you in. So
why did you now as well for your last I don't know walk on that stage.
Yeah, that was something. I must say, even I was a bit taken aback. Where am I? Look, so Zack Polanski, thank you so much. I want to swear you into the Uppity Circle. So we've got 3 questions we want to ask you, and then we'll play a game with you. Then we'll go into just pure points of blackness and speak to our audience altogether. And the first is, so if you were chopped into 2, and there was I want you to think of a book that speaks to you and your politics and everything that you're about, or really informed you or inspired you. And if you were chopped into 2 that you believe this book, what would that book be?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. I've landed, but it depends on the day, if I'm honest. I think there's lots of different books that speak to different moments.
Yep.
But there's a book from a few years ago called The Overstory by Richard Powers. The reason why that's important is a story about 9 people all around the world who are involved with trees, the pro-breeze. But then it's very clear throughout the book that there's no environmental justice without racial, social, and economic justice too. And all of these nice stories about trees that are much more about the growth, the nurturing, the development, the mycelium, so the way that the trees talk to each other and how we're connected. I read it's a book about community. So if anyone's looking for a book recommendation, The Overstory by Richard Powers.
The Overstory by Richard Powers. So Zack Polanski, we're going to swear you into the Uppity Circle with the Overstory. So Black Polanski, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, the black truth, and none but the truth, so help you, the Overstory by
Richard Powers.
Welcome to the Uppity Circle.
Thank you very much.
There we go. So we've got Zack Polanski.
No, it's like not two questions.
We got Zack Polanski to say that's going to be a Daily Mail headline tomorrow. Zack Polanski swears to tell the black truth. But there we go. So then, but also too, another thing I want to ask you about too, Evie, there's a quote that you swear by, that you not say you swear by, you live by. That this is a quote that really just guides you. Also, so if it was Tops, for example, Tops would say, "The master's tool card can't actually down the master's house." We'll never do. Okay, fair enough. You can see the Bussiah twins' his little sister over there. So you've got baby Bussiah twins over there ready. So that was Audrey Lorde. Sorry, I'm so sorry. We're coming to the trial of feminism soon. So which I know you're going to love. But anyway, so Zack, is there a quote that you swear by? What would that be?
Yeah. So again, there's a few. I just come from Cardiff, so I'm going to go for a Welsh author called Raymond Williams.
Nice.
And then he said, "Being radical is making hope possible and not despair convincing." The other one I go for, though, and I think it's the same quote said in another way, is Nelson Mandela. Everything is impossible until it's done. And actually, I think it speaks a lot to the conversation we're just having. Maybe we'll get into about pragmatism versus what can actually be done.
Yep.
And I think anything can be done if you make sure the politicians are on board and paid for.
Fantastic. The boy's good. He's good. He's good at this. It's his first time here. He's good. We'll ask you one final question, then we'll go and play a quick game, and then we'll go into our points of blacklist. I just want to know, so what the final thing I need to know from you, or I think we just want to know about it from you tonight, is that if you're on your last moment on earth and you can only dance your last dance to one song, what would that song be? And don't say Straight Outta Compton by NWA. Because the male are just going to say that you're pandering to a black woman. Please look.
So I'm going to go for two again, which I know is sort of cheating, but I'm going to
you're welcome to.
why I'm going for two.
Please.
Because if I was about to die, I don't think I want to dance. I think I want to have like a slow, intimate moment. So I'll talk about that one.
Good.
But then I'll actually answer a question if I was going to dance. So I have a slow, intimate moment. My favourite song, my boyfriend's over there. Richie, give everyone a wave.
Richard, let him see your handsome boyfriend. Richard, please stand up. Let us see the bicep. Let's see the guns. Let them see the guns. Put them up. Whoa. Good, please.
But our song for like a special moment is Whitney Houston, and it's Home, and it's a very specific performance, which is where, how old is she? She's like 16. I think it's one of the first performances on live TV. And she comes on stage. I think about this like performance a lot when I'm giving speeches, because it's just like this calm, almost nervousness. It's Whitney Houston, so she's not nervous.
Yep.
Yeah, well, should I nervous? And it's just a very, very calm and very chilled. You don't really think it's going to expand.
Yeah.
And then suddenly the key change and the expansion, and by the end of it, just this epic moment. You probably know the song from The Wiz. Yeah, The Wiz of Oz musical. And it's just this amazing performance, which just goes from 0 to 60 very, very quickly, and it's phenomenal. So I think that's probably one of the last songs I want to listen to, just because of the lyrics.
And that is the song called, again, it's called?
Home
by Whitney Houston. Can we cue that for the last song of the evening, please? So there we go. But please, but sorry.
If I'm going to dance, I've not got a story, but it's Donna Summers, I Feel Love.
Can we cue Donna Summers? I feel that. But there we go. So we'll get both of them done. Look, Zack Polanski, welcome to Uppity. It's absolutely delight to have you here. Thank you so much. We're going to play a quick game with you. We're going to play a quick game with you, really, really quick one, and the audience can be as interactive as possible. So those of you who thought you got the best seats, once again, you got the bad seats. Sorry, we're just going to keep going for now. And then, so this is a game called Content of Their Content. So the norm is that, of course, we're taught by the great Dr. Martin Luther King that we must judge people by the content of their character, but not the colour of their skin. And we agree with that. But we want you to judge these people not by the content of their politics, but by the content of their content, that you just objectively observe them, not as political figures per se, or not whether you agree or not with their politics, but how you view them as a political operator and their communication styles and how good they are at getting their messages and their policies across.
So you're pushing me to be as superficial as possible.
I am indeed. Yeah, I am indeed. So we've got people scared. Oh my God Almighty! This screen is too small for our ambition. But let's start. So we're going to rate the people on 4 different levels. One is the top is of course prime. Then the middle is basic. The sub middle is sub prime, and the bottom is junk. And we need our screen to come together quickly as possible. And you'll see all the faces. So one by one.
I feel like this game is how much trouble can you get with these?
No, far from it. So we've got quite a lot of amazing people here, some not so amazing people too. So on the bottom of the top, we've got a full rogues gallery. So let's start with let's go to where to somebody you guys have conquered recently. Let's start with Matt GPT. So Matt Goodwin on the top right over there. Where would you rate the content of his content?
I mean, on every single level, he's junk.
Okay, fair enough. Quickly moving on. Let's go to Tony Blair, bottom left. How do you rate Tony Blair? So remember...
As an operator.
Yep, as an operator.
I mean, it depends if your intention is to kill lots of innocent people. You know, that's prime if that's your intention.
Yep.
He was an incredible communicator, and he did win a huge majority, so it's prime, and I hate myself for saying that. But
No. We can do how I do things. You see, I'm up at night coming up with this stuff. You see what I mean? So, anyway.
How much do I like him as junk? Because it's how successful were they and their own kind of intentions, and
it's prime. Okay, fine. So, absolutely. So, shall we let's go to George Galloway. Oh, no, the Tony Blair was prime, not junk, sorry. Yeah. And so where are we putting George Galloway on the same metric?
I'm going to go for George Galloway as subprime, and I'll explain why.
Interesting.
So there are issues where George Galloway speaks to the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
And some of the things we were talking before about a politician who's willing to get into trouble.
Yep.
I think there has to be admiration and props for that.
Yeah.
At the same time, I've seen him several times throw the trans community under the bus, the LGBT community under the bus. None of us are free until we're all free. And it's really, really important that we have a sense of consistency and our morality. And he annoys all the very worst people in public life, particularly journalists. So I'm going for subprimes because I think he's confusing. I think there's moral inconsistency, but also I think it'd be unfair to put him as junk because at times he's stood on business.
I hear that. I love the term stood on business too. Shall we go to, let's go to Barack Obama. I don't think too many people hold a candle for him here.
It's so ironic. I'm more worried in this room than any other room. But he is prime.
Yeah.
And he undoubtedly threw his community or communities under the bus on so many different issues.
Yeah.
But if I'm looking at someone who could speak and move you, even when I still watch some of his old speeches, or even when he speaks now, even though I know that there's a moral incongruency and I've got lots of questions about decisions he's made and what he did in power, I think as a communicator, he's phenomenal. And I think, I've never said this out loud before, but if I sat down with him or had time with him, I think there is an emotional compassion and level of intelligence that didn't come through as a politician, but I still think is probably an amazing human being if a very flawed politician. So it's still going fine.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, too, there's undoubtedly masses of problems with
absolutely.
a lot of things.
Absolutely, and that's probably true of most people.
But if I'm putting Blair and Prime, then above the clearly. But I take the point. That's smiling.
So let's do something a bit controversial then. Well, let's go with Nick Clegg. You guys don't like Nick Clegg? You don't like data miners or so? Anyway, but there we go.
I mean, since Mr. Anonymous pointed out that a decade ago I was a Liberal Democrat, I'm going to have to put him in junk to prove a point, first of all. But I think, he inspired a whole generation of young people. He got lots and lots of people excited, including myself, at the idea of tuition fees. And then he sold out every single person in this country for a 5p cut on plastic bags or a 5p charge on plastic bags. I also think the conditions of austerity are still what we're facing right now. Under Keir Starmer, it's still destroying our communities, it's destroying our environment, it's destroying our democracy. Nick Clegg can't take credit for all of that. A lot of that was David Cameron, most of it was Thatcher and Reagan. But Nick Clegg was, he can't even take credit for coming up with Thatcherism or Reaganism. It was kind of a recycled one done badly, and then he went to work for Meta. And I think, there's no good words to be said for Nick Clegg.
Okay. So we're probably going to do about, so please, you're welcome to applause. We're good. I don't think we get through all of these, or so we're not having time to get it. But let's go through some prominent ones. Shall we do Donald Trump?
Oh my God, guys.
I'm juggling between junk and subprime.
Thank you.
Only because he's been elected president twice. That being said, I saw today his poll ratings are absolutely crumbling. I also think he needs to go behind bars, and I'm presuming that wasn't his intention. And I do kind of hope one day we will see him behind bars. And I'm pretty sure that can happen, so let's put him in junk.
Junk. Okay, junk for him. Let's look up Zora Mandani.
That one's easy. That's prime. That's above prime right now.
That's above prime. There we go. So, that was easy. So let's go to the man of the moment, Sir Keir Starmer.
That's junk. I don't think that's a hard one. Really. I think whether we're going politically, content-wise, delivery, dullness, boredom, selling out meat. I mean, I think there's very few redeeming factors for Keir Starmer.
Okay, no love lost there. Let's go with Nigel Farage quickly.
I go put Farage in subprime for some of the similar reasons as George Galloway, actually. I think, when I think about someone who's thinking about voting reform, that's very different from Nigel Farage.
Yep.
That's someone who's upset, disappointed, angry with the political system.
Yeah.
I was about to say they feel like they've been left behind. They don't just feel like they've been left behind.
Yep.
They have been left behind by decades of austerity and establishment politicians who are taking away from corporate lobbies. Now that all speaks to Farage as well.
Yeah.
But one thing he is good at is channeling the anger that people feel right now in a way that lots of the politicians don't. And I think I'd be being churlish to say he doesn't do that well.
Yeah.
The problem, which is why he's not basic or prime, he's definitely not prime, is that none of his solutions are going to make things any better. In fact, they're going to make things worse. They're going to create more division and hatred. But if your analytical view is, does he stir hatred well, then yes, clearly he does.
Gotcha.
Although we're 4% behind them in the poll today, so
Yep.
You're moving to junk soon when we overtake them.
Fair enough. Let's touch on David Lammy, then we'll come back to it.
I don't know if Mr. Anonymous has got to me. No, I'm joking. I think it would be unfair to put him in junk, though. I think, particularly the Lammy report around the justice system, I think there are conversations to be had. Does it make it worse if you spot what the problems are, analyse them well, and then continue to support a party that's making them worse?
Yep.
I think there is an argument there. Having said that, there have been very few black politicians in this country, and I think it should be recognised when people have hearing tops in the side.
Top, you can hear the earthquake coming from top the top of
They
speech.
didn't even say anything, but I could feel the vibration.
So we're putting in the subprime. Lammy's the subprime.
Yeah, just leave
Okay.
it as subprime.
Fair enough. Maybe someone will throw up in the junk one of these days. Let's see. Let's go with. So we'll go with in any order you want. We'll go with Kemi Putin and then JC, Jeremy Corbyn. Because obviously, the Liz Truss is where she belongs. So there we go. Cameron, we've done too many Tories, so Cameron and Thatcher, we can leave those behind. Let's go with Kemi, Putin, and JC, whichever one you want to go in, whichever order you would like.
I mean, I'll go with the most controversial one I'm going to put. I'm going to put Thatcher in basic. And that's because she fought for her class. She made sure that she knew what she wanted. She was just on the wrong side and fighting for her class. But I think there's a lot we could learn from Thatcher's project in terms of how there was an obvious mission and she wasn't going to be distracted from that mission. And it's that old phrase of the right look for, you can agree with them and the left look for traitors.
Yeah.
And I think she undoubtedly had a mission and it's still suffering to this day.
Yeah.
I mean, we probably should put her in prime, but there's no way we'll put Margaret Thatcher in prime, so we're going to keep her in basic. And Kemi, I was trying to be kind and not put her in junk, but I just... Yeah. Are we saying she's junk?
Yes.
Yep.
Hear this person's argument because I just feel like...
Sorry, let's
Hold on. I'm coming.
I can tell what you've got to
Hold on,
say.
here we go.
Point of backless. If we're using this as a metric, arguably has Farage not done the same thing? And Donald.
Yeah, there are lots
Just
of
question.
services come from.
Yeah, I hear that. So my I guess rebuttal to that, or yes, I'm partly agreeing with you, is I think Farage and Trump are going to come crumbling down in a way that Thatcher will be remembered as, even to the day that she died, and this is not me defending Thatcher, even to the day she died, she has left a legacy that we're still living with today. I think the response, I don't hope, we're going to have to make the response to Farage and Trump rising that's about to happen in this country, where communities come together and go, these men
Yeah.
do not represent us, this politics doesn't represent us. And there's that whole thing about, making sure that we see the strength of our character as communities in our hardest moments. And I know so many communities feel scared and afraid right now, and are right to. But actually, I hope the legacy of Farage and Trump is the opposite of the legacy of Thatcher.
What about legacy? What about Putin? That we touched on here.
You do what Ian Dale did to me the other day and start doing impressions of Putin.
Oh no, I would never do it to you.
It's a funny story. He said that he wanted me to negotiate with him, like on LBC.
But I did see it.
And Georgia, who's with me, who works for my staff team, was in the green room and was like, Seth, they started to panic, and then he thought, oh wait, I've got an ex-accent out there. He's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. But I didn't play the same. Putin's he's a giant, isn't he? I think, we'll see. Okay.
The Reds are coming out. There we go.
I mean,
Even the cameraman's breaking the fourth wall.
He's a joke because he rules by the gun. He doesn't convince people. He rules by sheer oppression. That's how he does. He's successful because he points guns at people and he throws his competitors in jail. There's no political debate. It's not him saying, "Oh, follow me." He threatens people, so he's drunk.
Fair enough. I must say, men with guns tend to be the basis of many of politics. Depending on who you ask also, men with guns, because I don't volunteer to pay to HMRC. I'm just scared of men with guns coming to my door or something else like that, but who knows anyway. Sorry. We lost. We need to wrap this up because we've got so much to get through. We'll come back to you in a moment. So sorry, we'll come back to you in a
I
moment.
think that's really interesting, though. So, men with guns, or anyone with guns.
Sure.
Underscores a lot of, I was glad to say, our criminal justice system. I
Yep.
spoke to one the other day, he said, don't call it the justice system, it's not just, it's the legal system. The criminal legal system
Yep.
is underpinned, but ultimately by incarceration or people being
Yeah.
worried about weapons.
Yep.
That being said, a successful political operator will not go straight from the gun.
Yeah.
The guns, the underscoring of highlights
Yep.
is far too often in our political conversation, whether it's explicit or implicit.
Gotcha.
Putin is making it complete.
Interesting. Last but not least at all, let's go to Jeremy Corbyn. Where would you place him?
I'm going to Jeremy Corbyn for crying. He got 3 million more votes than Keir Starmer. And it's interesting because it's interesting, I was on stage last week with Yanis Varoufakis and Jeremy Corbyn and Craig Blakely. And we just hear constantly in the media, politics shouldn't be like Jeremy Corbyn, it failed, etc., etc., etc. It failed at a first-past-the-post system where he had an entire political party undermining him at every possible opportunity.
Yeah.
But actually what I really take from that is when there was an election, the politics of care, the politics of community,
Yeah.
the politics that was anti-austerity and about investment
Yep.
was actually much more popular in this country than any other kind of politics. Now, does that mean I agree with every decision? No, absolutely not.
Yep.
But I think undoubtedly the values, the care, the compassion, and the character of the man and the way he conducted himself is undoubtedly crying.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Zack Polanski, thank you so much. Zack, let's get into a conversation. Zack, thanks so much for coming to Uppity once again and welcome into the circle. We're going to have, now we've got about 45 minutes and we're going to have a really, really good conversation with you. That will be as a dialogue, as we call it. So your points of blackness are more than welcome here at any given time. You're welcome. Also too, we're not shy, you can film this. You can film whatever you want to film and put it online and just tag us and then, so we can grow our flock.
I feel like I need to keep spinning.
Yeah, you pretty much do. Or would you like to sit? Would you like to sit down?
I'm happy to sit down.
Yeah, let's sit down.
I was on it harder because
Okay. Fair enough.
what about your camera?
Did they say they've had the nice side? Anyway, swiftly moving on. Right, so let's get into this then. Let's get into Zack. So Zack Polanski, here you are. You're a early 40s politician. You're obviously born and raised in Britain. I want to know a bit more about your history. What brought you into this? What brought you into politics first of all? And then, in fact, let's start from you as a little boy, because once upon a time, everybody was happy you were born in hospital. And then here we are now, and we're all still happy, but we just want to know how you got to here, to this level where you are right now. So tell us your journey in a nutshell.
Yeah, so I was born in Hope Hospital, which ranks itself.
Yep.
And I was totally uninterested in politics, even in my 20s. So I do just want to shout out the 15-year-old behind me here and a 16-year-old over there. And I'm sure there's other guys.
Yeah, we've got Malia over here, Malia Whitehead over there, and we've got who else is there?
And yeah.
We've got some brilliant young people here. And you're a budding politician. Okay, fair enough. But we do have a budding politician over here. We've got Malia Whitehead over here. Little Malia, say wave to him. Well, there we go. Thank you. She did not know that was going to happen to her tonight. But there we go. Sorry, Zach, you were saying about your history. Yeah?
And I can only imagine the difference it would have made to be a teenager and be in these kind of spaces. So I think it's incredible that you guys are here. I'd always encourage people who have young people in their lives to keep encouraging into, especially something as interactive as this. Also, your niece is here tonight as well, isn't it? I don't want to...
Yeah, well, I've got quite... Oh, Nolly's here, yes, absolutely. Nolly's here, absolutely. My daughter's going to be so furious that because she's a budding politician herself, and my other niece also a budding politician. She's about to study politics. But yeah, you were saying, yes.
So I didn't grow up in a political household. What I did grow up doing, though, I was very kind of shy. My parents got divorced around 11 years old and 12 years old. I'm not trying to tell a super sob story, but I think any young person whose parents gets divorced at that age, found it difficult.
Yeah.
And so going to school, I'd kind of having real confidence issues, real not being able to find my place. And then it's interesting I'm telling this because yesterday I was at the National Education Union. I gave a keynote speech, and just amazing to look out a room and just see all the educators and support staff really enjoying the Green Party and really enjoying what I had to say. But one of the stories I told was the importance of drama classes for me at that age. Yeah. And I wouldn't be stood here right now if I hadn't had those drama classes. And so I'm not avoiding the question and diverting to education. Yeah. But the importance of education, not just to be about English and maths, as important as they is, but about creative subjects, about creative arts, about being able to be free and to have a diversity of thought and opinion and to debate is so important. Going through drama lessons, I think, gave me a lot of confidence. I then started to do theatre acting, but the bit that was really interesting to me was something called theatre of the oppressed. So this started in the 1970s. I wasn't there around back then. 1970s, I always struggle with this word, favelas in South America, some of the poorest kind of areas of South America.
Brazil, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Where people would work with actors to kind of work through their problems. So the idea would be, and don't worry, I'm not going to make anyone get up, or am I? You would talk to a group of people who felt oppressed in some way, so once I started doing it, I was doing it with renters, with migrants, with disabled people. You say to a room of people, has anyone faced a scene of oppression recently? A time where they felt like they wanted to say something or do something and they'd just not been heard. So an audience member puts their hand up and you say, no, don't tell me, show me. And the idea is, and this is corny, but stay with me, that you're not spectators, you're spectactors. Because the whole point is rather than like theatre or art, being someone sitting and watching something as a passive observer, which is what the establishment want us to do. They want us to feel like we're watching a show that we don't have an active agency in. The idea is you get people up on their feet to start, they call it rehearsing the revolution. So you're getting in there and you're getting involved. So the person plays their scene of oppression, they tell the other actors what to do, and then you say to an audience member, what could someone else in this scene do? And then they go, they could, and you go, no, don't, tell me, show me. So you get people up to start rehearsing allyship, to start practicing allyship. And very often you don't let people leave the room, this is why we're not doing it tonight, until they've practiced what it means to challenge power, to challenge wealth. And one of my most powerful moments of doing this when I moved to London was at Union Chapel, which was in Islington. It was around about the time that there'd been lots of what I would say were illegal migrant raids. Obviously the police would say they were legal migrant raids, but the police would be lying. Where they were storming into buildings and taking people in the night. And so what we were rehearsing people to do was if you see what happens and you have the power and privilege to do it, it's not making everyone challenge the police. I'm certainly aware in this room, different people have different levels of privilege when challenging the law. But if you're able to and you have the power, the privilege, the flexibility, the voice to do it, these are the kinds of questions you could ask the police officer that keep you safe, but also show allyship to the person that they might be raiding. And so I started to do more and more of that work. And every time we would have an evening, the evening would almost always end with someone going, we need to find a politician or a group of politicians or campaigners to legislate, to change the law. And that's when I started to think, I want to stop writing these stories and start actually getting involved with politics. Now, to undermine the entire story I just told you, and I really mean this, no one's coming to save you. Politicians aren't coming to save you. And I know that can sound contradictory when I'm the leader of a political party. I'm incredibly proud of the Green Party. Being the leader of the Green Party is undoubtedly the honour and privilege of my life. The Green Party can't save you. But what we can do is save ourselves. And the political party, when worked in combination with movements, with campaigns, with communities, as a voice with that community rather than for it, and still being held accountable by the community, that's when things can start to change.
Gotcha.
Now, none of that is simple, none of that is easy, but I would say it's a lot more simple and easy than the politics we've got. Because the final thing I'd say just on this answer is I've got into politics, but I can stand here and tell you, hand on heart, I'll swear on the book if I need to, the overstory, I've never taken a penny from oil and gas companies, from private healthcare companies, from arms trade companies, from gambling companies. And what's weird is, as I said that, I knew some people were going to applaud, and thank you. But how ridiculous is it that we hear someone say, I'm not corrupt, I've not been bought off, I'm standing here tonight because I'm funded by members and not by dirty money from multimillionaires and billionaires. We kind of go, oh, that's a relief. But we shouldn't be surprised when we get the politics we get, when we have politicians who have been bought and paid for. Without kind of relitigating the whole trial we've just had, because I think Peter has ruled it down and finished. Sorry, the room has ruled. We're not at one judge tonight. We're a democracy. Is that even in opposition, David Lammy, but more widely the Labour opposition, they weren't saying what the Green Party is saying now. They were still saying what they needed to say to please the markets, to please the people who donated them, particularly Rachel Reeves, who constantly obsesses about keeping the markets happy. And the deep irony is that the markets hate her politics. So it's gone wrong on several different levels.
So let's get into the knee deep of politics then. And guys, remember, so this time will flow by. So if you have points of blackness, please do shout out. So just to come clean, so I used to work in financial services. So actually, my former boss is actually here today. So there we go. She's a lady with money. But there we go. But I'll just say this to you. So about what you say about the bond markets, and actually just, would the Green Party's policy to, because if you look at what happened with Liz Truss, trying to actually ignore the bond markets, or trying to ignore the markets essentially, and everything, it pretty much led to some degree of catastrophe. Yeah, the cost of parting, my dear friend, we're still paying for it this very moment. But I'm just wondering, when you're thinking about it from a green perspective, that the thing I think is attractive, one of the many things that has attracted people to the Greens is that its politics is unusual. You are offering a different way of doing things, a different way of doing things, a different way of seeing things. You just mentioned right there about Rachel Reeves being beholden to, say, the bond market. What would your relationship be? What would the Green Party's relationship be like with, say, the bond markets or financial services in general? No, the bond market specifically.
Okay, let's start with the bond markets. Yeah. I think the most important thing to say, so I met a couple of weeks ago with Joseph Stiglitz, who's a Nobel-winning economist. Yep. And we talked about this Liz Truss story that you hear constantly. Yep. And just in case anyone's, thinking what might my opinion be about Liz Truss, then it would be in the basic. Oh wait, you put a below basic.
We did, yeah. We thought by default that Liz.
I mean, that was rude and nasty, so I'm glad I didn't do that.
Subjunct, yes, that's what we finished that. Yep.
But there's two things we really need to challenge in this country. Two metaphors that I would say are incredibly corrosive when you have any conversation about economics in this country. One is that a national economy is anything like a household budget.
Yep.
And when we put Nick Clegg, or I put Nick Clegg in basics with the room's approval, I felt. That was because he played a huge part in doing that, and constantly telling these stories about maxed out credit cards, about saying how we need to balance the books. And full transparency, one of the reasons why I was a Lib Dem 11 years ago was because that story made sense to me, because it's an intuitive story if you don't know anything else about politics. And you're someone who you think about balancing your personal budget, it makes sense if politicians go, we can't afford that, we've got to afford that. And you think, well, why is everyone shouting about, at them about that? That kind of makes sense. But that's not how the economy works. But the second and more important point is there's a big difference between borrowing money for investment and borrowing money for consumption. So what Liz Truss was doing was she was borrowing money to fund unfunded tax breaks for her multimillionaire and billionaire friends. That is very different from the kind of borrowing that I and the Green Party are talking about. I'm talking about investing in our schools, in our hospitals, in our communities. And there's something called spending multipliers, and I won't send the room to sleep, so I'll do this briefly, but it is an important concept. So a spending multiplier is every pound that you put in the economy, you're basically getting an investment back.
Yep.
It's a bit like, so we're not, a national economy is not like a household budget. A closer metaphor, but it's still not entirely accurate, is a national economy is a bit like starting up a company. Mm-hmm. It would be mad if you're starting up a company and struggling to then cut back entirely and not spend on anything. You're going to go bankrupt quickly. When you're starting up a company, you invest to get the money back into your company. Mm-hmm. Now, we have the figures for this. Every pound that you put in the economy for renewable energy, you get about £1.50 back. So pretty good return. Every pound that you spend on rail, you get £2.50 back because of all the people who are able to travel around the country. That's going to be better for your economy. Mm-hmm. Buses have a real key magic ingredient. Every pound you spend, you get £4.50 back. Which, by the way, when Jeremy Corbyn, I remember one Prime Minister's questions, he started to ask a question about buses. And the national media, largely the right-wing media, but frankly the centrist media too, really kind of went at him for it, going, why are you talking about buses? This isn't important. I'm like, buses are a lifeline for people to get to work, to get to hospital, or frankly, just to see a mate and actually, thrive in life rather than just survive. And I think what that spoke to is the very narrow frame that lots of commentators and journalists, not all journalists, see politics as and see the economy as. Mm-hmm. And they see the economy as only about bond markets as opposed to what's known as the foundational economy. Mm-hmm. What is it like when your next bill comes through and you're worried about energy, you're worried about water? The fact we have water companies pumping sewage into our rivers and charging us extra for the privilege when 30 to 40% of our bills is going on the debt to serve those dividends to the shareholders is absolutely outrageous. Mm-hmm. So finally, in terms of the bond markets, then they're not ideological. They just want to know there's a practical plan, a plan that is going to have investment and is going to make sense. And what we've seen over 5 successive prime ministers is no plan. We've just kind of careered all over the place. We've got Keir Starmer saying economic growth is the plan. Mm-hmm. Economic growth isn't a plan. Economic growth is what happens when you have a plan for investment and then you have growth back into your economy. Mm-hmm. But going straight for the growth at the same time as cutting schools, cutting prisons, prisons more complicated, cutting education, makes absolutely no sense at all.
You're 100% bang on, because it's something even if you've studied economics, just the basics of an economy, or aggregate demand, C plus I plus G plus X minus M, which just means that the middle, slap bang in is government spending, just looking at it.
I have no idea what you just said.
Oh, sorry. It's just studying, so it just means, it's just...
this is when I need a chancellor.
It's the formula for a GDP, consumption plus investment plus government spending plus exports minus imports. I'll come to you in a split second. But the key thing about it there is that I always found it interesting during the austerity years that government spending was just always cut. I think to myself, that doesn't make it. If you do A-level in economics, one of the first things they teach you is that an economy will rescind the more you start cutting out of it, and that's what's happened in the last how many years. But I just think that...
Can I just add too, because I was joking about the algorithm. I was talking about this last month with Mariana Mazzucato, who's an amazing economist. In fact, she's strangely advised Keir Starmer. But one thing she says about that algorithm is it very much depends when people are talking about GDP too. They're talking about different things. Very often they don't even get the algorithm right. Or the thing they're measuring is not the right thing to be measuring. Yeah. And in fact, Simon Kuznets, the very guy who designed the idea of GDP, so that's a terrible way to measure the health and well-being of a country.
Yeah, agreed.
If you're the water company, to come back to them, if you pump sewage into the water and then clean it up, GDP is going up by the cleanup, even though you destroyed the river in the first place. If you decide to go to war, I don't know, say a illegal and unpopular war in Iran or in Lebanon, joking aside, because it's very, very grim, that's good for GDP because you're spending money on military and security. It's clearly not good for the health and well-being of this country, or more importantly, for the innocent people who are being killed in Lebanon and Iran and Palestine.
Fantastic. Can I just ask one final thing? We'll just go forefront point of blackness in a moment. Many people argue that the Green Party have moved away from issues that they would traditionally associate the Greens with. So, for example, environmentalism. And I think people are very comfortable with you just being in environmentalism and no further than that. But many of the arguments that I've witnessed you make and other people and people in your party have made too is actually pointing out the connectivity between environmentalism and different things and using it as a basis to expand a little bit further in terms of your actual politics itself. I just wondered from your perspective, and there are some things I must point out. This is a black room, for example. Can I just do a quick poll of hands? How many people in this room drive? Okay, the people who drive, keep your hands up. How many of you like the low traffic neighborhood things? Put your hands down if you don't like them. Okay, so you drive and you like the low traffic neighborhood. Do you live in an LTN? Put your hand down. This guy's a sellout over here. No, I'm joking. But yeah, but the key thing about it is that if you take, for example, there's going to be some moments where, for example, green policy. So if you take for St. Anne's in Tottenham, that was probably one of the reasons why. Shh, your boss is talking. The Greens. I'm joking. But yeah, but
Tops is definitely my boss, by the way, just to make that very, very clear.
Mine too. But the key thing, if you take in St. Anne's, for example, they put an LTN there, it's completely unpopular. And I think that sometimes some of the fear that you're currently hearing, I think you guys are going to do fantastically well in the local elections. My fear is the local elections after that. So when people are looking at things like LTNs, congestion charge, ULEZ, so on and so forth, in places like London, it becomes a point where, to a degree, it feels like London might be over-regulated, particularly on the environmental level. And I'm just wondering what your perspective on that is. Is there a third or a different way here, or is this pretty much the direction of travel that we should expect things to go in?
So I think there's two main kind of pillars to talk about there. So the first pillar is the kind of premise of the question, which absolutely environmental justice is interlinked with everything else. I think one of the most obvious examples in London is incinerators. Incinerators are awful for people's health. And when you map where incinerators are in London, they're almost always where working class communities and or racialised, marginalised, global majority communities, whatever term, or black communities, whatever term is most appropriate. And so this is not by a coincidence. This is because a lot of the time those areas are also in areas that used to vote Labour. They're safe seats, or so-called safe seats they used to be. That means the person who's representing that community didn't have to worry about the votes of that community. They were just able to turn up at the ballot box on election day, get voted through, and then it's not always a bribe, and I'm not going to say it's always a bribe, but whether it's money under the table, or whether it's just a nicer cabinet position for being quiet, or whether it's a future job. I think that's often why politicians haven't spoken up against what, when their communities are campaigning, they go to their community, I'm not worried about it, I'm just going to keep going. And so you can't be an environmentalist without recognising that inequality is at the heart of what's destroying our environment. It's the same polluters, the multimillionaires and billionaires, the same people, by the way, that we could link to colonialism, empire, imperialism that still goes on to this day, who are the same people who are either own the fossil fuel companies or in hock to the fossil fuel companies, as well as the arms trades companies. So all of those kind of systems, obviously that's a much longer answer to give you, are inextricably linked, and they're all destroying our environment. Low traffic neighbourhoods. So I think the first thing to say is one of the things I'm proud of as the Green Party is sometimes we say things that aren't popular, and then we work to win the argument. Now, this is a difference between, sometimes you get politicians who say, I'm a blank sheet of paper, I'm just going to listen to the public, and then I'm going to do what they want. That's not really politics, and it's just going to end up, in the wrong place. Nor should it be, and I think this is a previous association of the Green Party. I'm here, the public's over there, so I'm just going to keep screaming at them and hectoring them until they come over here and decide I'm right. There's something about meeting in the middle, coming as far as you can go to say, I will explain and I will listen, both at the same time, to why this needs to happen. So the reason why I get to this is because we have a climate crisis. We know that's a scientific fact. We've got peer-reviewed research over and over again. I don't imagine there's many climate deniers in the room.
Any climate deniers in the room?
Maybe we'll get onto that in a moment. As well as that, though, and it's interlinked, we have an air pollution crisis. If you take the tube through certain areas of our city, for each tube stop, you will lose half a year of your life in terms of life expectancy. And again, just like the incinerators, it won't surprise you to know that the places with the worst life expectancy and the worst toxic air are working class communities and or black, racialised, marginalised global majority communities. And again, that's no coincidence. So with low traffic neighbourhoods, what we know we have to do is we have to reduce the amount that people drive in the city, and the and is important. It has to be done fairly. So there are certain places where public transport is brilliant, it's cheap, it's affordable, it's accessible. I would say unless you're disabled, unless you've got kids that really need to get somewhere, get out your car and get on the bus as long as it's affordable, if it's a journey where it's able to do that. There are places in London, and I've been to, and certainly outside of London, where the public transport is crap. Sometimes I could say to you, wait for a bus, and you might say you're going to wait a few hours. You might be waiting a few days. How can you turn to people who don't have public transport, or it's not affordable, or there's no bus shelter, and say, get out your car, get on public transport. People go, that's ridiculous. There's people flying over our heads in private jets, polluting the air, polluting the climate, and you're blaming my car. So I think the key function to this is people just want to know it's fair. They want to know that we're cleaning up the air and that all of it isn't falling on working class communities or minority communities or global majority communities. That actually politicians are treating people as adults. They're telling the truth. They're being transparent about their thinking. And they're doing genuine community consultation. Because the final thing I'd say, my observation about lots of low traffic neighbourhoods is a council, it's previously been a Labour council more often, has decided they're going to do it, and I might agree with that decision. And I'd say, by the way, Sadiq Khan did this with the ultra-low emission zone. I support the ultra-low emission zone. I'm not coming here to say I don't. But I didn't feel like there was genuine community consultation on it. What happened is, a group of people went into a back room, decided how it was going to be, then turned to the public and said, we're consulting, but what they were really doing was notifying, because no matter what anyone said, it was going to go the way it went. Yeah. And for instance, with the ultra-low emission zone, there should have been a much bigger scrappage scheme. So if someone couldn't afford a car that isn't polluting, then it's outrageous to say we're going to charge you more, because the person who couldn't afford a better car or a more upgraded car is also someone who's likely to be poorer. But by the way, the poorest people can't get in a car at all or don't own a car at all, so it's also important to say that. And so with the low traffic neighbourhoods, it's really important that people bring communities with them. That requires work, it requires turning up. But if you're a politician who doesn't want to work or doesn't want to turn up, then why are you a politician? Ultimately, it's got to be about having difficult conversations with people, but also being based in your values, explaining what your values are, and making sure you're working with people rather than doing two things. So it's a long answer, but it's a complicated question.
Sure. Let's get to queer blackness. Hold on a second. I want to hear from some people who haven't spoken to that yet, because we've got a lot to talk to. Oh, but Michael, please.
Thank you. Zach, it was interesting.
Point of blackness, you need to say first.
Point of blackness.
Thank you.
I did say it like 15 minutes ago. But never mind. Zach, it was intriguing, interesting, and compelling hearing you talk earlier about allyship. I heard you speak about allyship before. Now, at the same time, it was jarring. It was jarring because later, or actually earlier this evening, the mighty Blackcurrant News published an article. Racism claims rock the Green Party as allegations of structural failure emerge. Leaked letter alleges retaliation, governance, and a breakdown, basically unfulfilled anti-racism commitments and wider concerns over the party's culture. Now, according to this article, you knew this, you know this, and you were approached for comment. I'd love to hear your comment in reply to this.
I'm going to need some clarification though, because I've not seen this letter or article. So which outlet did you say it was?
This was Blackcurrant News.
Right.
Blackcurrant's a fairly new outfit, but it's fairly new outfit. It's by the highly respected journalist Nadine White. So it's her outfit. So
Yeah. So we need anti-racism in the Green Party clearly because racism exists in society. Whether that racism is Islamophobia, whether it's anti-Semitism, whether it's non-faith racism based on someone's colour of someone's skin. So any politician and certainly any political leader needs to take racism seriously. Now, the way the Green Party works is it's a democratic vote, so it's one member, one vote. Whether you joined the party 10 years ago, 1 year ago, whether you join it tonight, it's a subtle hint to the people in the room. It's important people get involved. And what happened at our last party conference is that a group of people brought an anti-racism motion to the conference. That passed. I was pleased to see it passed, and I was pleased to support it. In terms of what needs to happen, has that been fixed in, when was the conference? October, it's what now? March, so we're talking like 6-7 months. No, it's not been fixed, but I'd be a fool to stand here and say that racism has been fixed. I don't expect it will be fixed next March, if I'm really honest with you. The question I think we need to ask ourselves is what is happening to make sure that we're challenging and tackling racism? What is happening to empower voices, particularly marginalised voices within the party and wider society? And what is happening to make sure that we've got a robust disciplinary system and before that, preventative education system to make sure we're doing that. I'm confident that work's happening. Is it happening at the rate it should happen? I think that's a different question. But I feel like the presupposition behind your question is that's not happening, and I reject that. What I think I do accept, and that's fair enough, is to say, can more be done? Yes, clearly more can always be done by any politician to challenge racism.
Point to blackness over here, please. Yep. Okay, please. Sorry, who's? Yeah, please. Can you stand up, brother, so we can see you, please?
Point of blackness.
Point, please.
So having volunteered for the Green Party and gone to Manchester to help Hannah's vote out, I feel like, and it could be anecdotal, that there was not very many black and brown faces. And I'm wondering if that's something that you agree with, and what you're doing as the Green Party leader to get more black and brown people involved, to door knock, to canvass, and to get the word out.
Yeah, I do agree with it. We need to be a much more diverse party, and that's undoubtedly true. This isn't me backing away from that, it's just for context. It's a whole lot more diverse than it used to be 2 years ago, and even in the last 6 months, it's exponentially more diverse. We're nowhere near where we need to be yet. Second thing, again, not a justification, but just context. When I look at other political parties, there is a lack of diversity generally in politics. That's, I think, several reasons. One of the main reasons, I think, is representation. I think if people haven't seen themselves represented on the political stage and they don't feel like it's for them. I had this beautiful moment on Saturday where I was marching with the Together Alliance. And just to my left, I was marching next to Bel Ribeiro Addy, Diane Abbott, and Dawn Butler, just on the side of me. Now, they're people whose politics, I could find points of difference, but undoubtedly 3 absolute icons in terms of the political scene. But the fact that, if you ask me to name other people in politics of colour, the list would be pretty short. It's getting longer, but it's still much shorter compared to the amount of white people in Parliament. That's before we even get to the question of class and the fact that one of the reasons why getting Hannah Spencer elected in Gorton and Denton, despite the billionaire donors taking on the Green Party, and thanks for your support with it, the Green Party won. And so to have a plumber, and mind a female plumber, in Parliament is huge. And I'm not avoiding the question about race, but I just want to come back to the point about class, and I'll come back to race. And obviously there's a Venn diagram here. One of the proudest achievements of my life was walking Hannah into Parliament on her first day, just knowing the difference it was going to make to have someone who's so straight-talking, uncompromising, who will challenge power and wealth, and you don't have to agree with her on everything. And I think this comes back to also my conversation with Michael just now. I think one of the things that Zoran says, I'm sure you all know Zoran's New York mayor. I met Zoran in the room, though, tonight as well. Hey, Zoran. I don't know if he's still there. He was quoting someone else, so it's me quoting him, quoting someone else, but bear with it. It's like a Russian doll quotes. If you agree with me on 7 out of 10 things, great, let's work together. If you agree with me on 10 out of 10 things, go see a psychiatrist, because that's weird. But the point I'm making is if you think I've come here tonight to say I've solved racism, or that I have the magic ingredient to make the Green Party as diverse as it possibly can be tomorrow, that's not why I came here tonight, because that would be a lie and that would be disingenuous. What I have come here tonight is to say that I deeply care about these things, that one political leader, particularly in a party that's as flat structured as the Green Party, cannot change these things alone at all. What I take responsibility for is coming to events like this, coming to lots of community events, and I do this all the time around England and Wales, particularly often prioritising events where there are going to be more diverse communities, because I know how let down they've been by politicians. In fact, last week I did an event in Haringey with the Kurdish community. They said to me they think it's the first time that a politician has ever come to speak to them directly and answer their questions like this. I wasn't asking for applause, though. I'm really not asking for applause, because that should be the norm. That should be the very basic thing. So my point is, I'm working really hard to do this, and I know it's not enough, because actually what I need is lots of people in the party who are all on the same mission. And that's, I'm kind of wasted here saying this to a room of largely black people, but I would say this if it was a room of white people, to also say, when people arrive in the party, make them feel welcome. And I think there's been a problem 5-10 years ago, that because there was only one black person who might turn up at a local party meeting, sometimes the opposite would happen. That a group of well-intentioned white people would run at them and go, do you want to be a candidate? Do you want to be on a leaflet? Do you want, tell us what to do? And they go, this is pretty overwhelming, I'm never coming back. And so it's about creating a culture, and I think one of the ways of creating that culture that I can't find another shortcut for is when there's strength in numbers, and actually a group of people arrive, and they don't feel tokenized, But that's got to work both ways. Well, it doesn't have to work both ways. It has to come from the people who are already there to go, we're not going to tokenize people. We are going to welcome people, make our space accessible and inclusive, and always work to improve our practice.
Point of blackness.
Please. Actually, make this as snappy as possible.
Yeah, I will.
Please.
As always, Nels. I'm a Green Party member, and you talk about not having, a magic wand, so to speak. Nobody's asking you to have a magic wand. What black members of the Green Party are asking you for is that when you are needed, that you stand up and be counted. Now, you talked about the motion, the anti-racist motion last autumn. That was voted the second most popular in the pre-conference vote. But your members inside the party tried to deprioritise it, and there was an inside battle going on to get it back onto the conference floor, which it eventually did. And by all accounts, you were nowhere to be seen in that particular round. So, the brother here has talked about, Brother Michael's talked about a report about systemic racism, and you said, more needs to be done. I'm sorry, but that's not good enough. You have opportunity sometimes to actually make a real difference. For example, you made a speech about the economy recently, and there was no mention of racism in the economy. These are the opportunities that you need to take, Zack. These are the opportunities you need to take.
Thank you. Can we just come to this young
Can I
man
push
here?
back? Because I don't think that's true.
You're welcome to push back.
There's two things there. So one, I did speak out for the anti-racism motion. I think there's a nuance here that, and it comes to the whole conversation we're having. As leader of the Green Party, as you know, it's very different to other political parties. I don't think the leadership should dictate what's on the conference floor, even when I agree with it, or I don't think I should speak out against it, even when I disagree with it, over and above any other member. And that's because I consider myself a member of the Green Party rather than a top-down organisation. So I accept a criticism if someone says, you're not proactive enough with getting involved with motions. But that's a leadership decision I've made. And what I would push back on is I've been consistent with that with everything. So both things that I think need to be done and things that I think shouldn't be done, I make sure that ultimately I give my opinion. So it's not that I'm silent, it's not that I'm apathetic or neutral. I give my opinion, but actually I make sure that the members are the ones that are empowered. In terms of my economy speech, it was entirely intersectional, and actually I did talk about race and class in that speech. So maybe we can take it out of this circle. Sure. But there were definitely moments, and in the Q&A, in fact, I spoke at length particularly about care experience young people and the disproportionality of young people of colour being in the care system, being treated like units and numbers from a privatised system. And that's undoubtedly also a conversation about race and class.
Sure. Quick question. Are you a member of the Green Party?
I'm about to be.
Okay. Because what we do, this is not the Green Party, the Green Conference or anything else. So I don't want it to become a Green Conference. I want it to be a bit broader than the inner workings of the Green Party. You have a broader question? There's a lot of pressure on you right now while I have this microphone. Just make it...
Sorry.
We have a ritual.
Sorry, yes, point of blackness. If it was down to me, in fact, it is. Ideologically speaking, I am so in line with you. And I very much hope to see that you are the next Prime Minister of this country. Now, that's because I view the world the way you view the world. My issue is, my fear is, and my question to you is, what we have seen over the last decade plus is the economic crisis that kind of is massively impacting the world and is really impacting this country is drawing more and more people to give in to their worst instincts. And it is drawing more, like that lurched right that we have continued to see for the last decade. I was 21 when Donald Trump first came into the office. I was stunned. I'm 31 now. People are still stunned as if this lean right and this lean into more extremism is some kind of aberration. It's not. People are desperate. People are very angry. People aren't even, sorry, I'm so sorry. People aren't just misinformed. They are very much attached to their negative ideals and leaning into those. You have a message of hope. How are you going to make a message of hope connect to people who are becoming increasingly more bitter, angry, rooted in their ignorance, and really attached to that ignorance? Thank you.
Thank you. What was your name, sorry?
Sorry, what's your name? Asher. Yeah, you emailed me. Yeah, absolutely. This guy was so desperate to come. He emailed us to make sure I actually reopened up the ticket sales. That's why we're so packed. So please, well done, please. So he deserves it. Yeah.
Thanks, Asher. I really appreciate you. I'm honestly not having beef with Leicester now by proxy. But in my economy speech last week, I answered this exact question by talking about the fact that the ties that bind us as communities are at risk of being frayed. For this exact reason that you're saying, because of economic instability. When inequality gets worse and worse, and we're living in a time where rich people are richer than they've ever been before, poor people are poorer, and this gap is getting wider and wider. Sorry, poor people aren't poorer, but the gap is wider than ever before. What that risks is a lot of what we're seeing, which is the rise of the far right, because they're able to churn that resentment. Now, I'm not apologising for a second, or not justifying the rise of the far right with austerity or with economic hardship, but we do know from history, those are the conditions that breed it. So the question then becomes, what do we do about it? And what we do about it is we change people's material living conditions. Yeah. How do we do that? We make sure that we bring in rent controls, for instance. It's absolutely outrageous that 50% of renters, over 50% of renters, are one paycheck away from losing their home. It's not a surprise when people are in that economic uncertainty and then charlatans like Farage come along and go, the people on the small boats are your problem, that people start to buy into that because they're stressed, they're tired, they're worried, and that's like an alluring narrative. What we need to do is point at the private jets, point at the multimillionaires and billionaires and the elites who are causing that. As well as rent controls. I talked about nationalising the water companies. That could bring people's bills down instantly. We need to make sure that we're doing things like building more social homes and council homes so people can actually get a council house and everyone's got a roof above their head. We need to make sure that we're reducing people's uncertainties around childcare, for instance. Far too many people are worried about the cost of childcare, and that means they can't go to work or they can't just live their life. Also, the impacts on women particularly, who are often, not always, but often the people who are doing the childcare are the people who are doing the care work, which is a hidden cost of the economy where they're doing that work and it's not being noticed. Now, the reason why I say all of that, and it comes back to my economic speech, is if you allow that material inequality to breed, then that's going to be bad for all communities. But we know more than anything, it's often worse for the black community because historically racism has always grown in those moments. Now, it's not to say if we tackle material inequality entirely, racism goes away. That would be a magic wand. But I do think it alleviates the tension in which you can have a much more kind of transparent and accountable conversation about race, which is where people are actually in the room and feel like they have an equality about it and they don't feel like they're being hard done by. So it's a really good question. I think it's the number one question, actually, because the very final bit you said is how do you give people hope? And I think you give people hope by saying hope isn't like buying a lottery ticket and just sitting around and waiting for your numbers to come up. Hope is, frankly, coming here tonight and getting involved in the conversation, even if it can be spiky. Hey, Michael. That's an important part as a leader to be held accountable and to be challenged. But hope is not just challenging a political leader. Hope is actually going, and I know lots of you in this room are doing this, what can I do in my community right now to make a difference? Because the very final thing I want to say in this answer, and I want to give a shout out to Tops here, is we met maybe 3-4 years ago where I saw Tope on Instagram talking about, I'm thinking about joining the Green Party, but I've got questions. So I reached out and said, let's go for coffee. I should caveat this story by now saying I would love to go for coffee with anyone who's thinking about joining the Green Party, but I'm a bit busier now than I was 4 years ago. But that coffee was worth every second for my moment, because one of the things Tope said to me was, I said, I understand some people aren't ready to leave the Labour Party yet because they're tired, they're stressed, they've got emotional trauma from having been in a political party, feeling that. They just need a moment. And Tope said to me, we don't have a moment. Black communities don't have a moment. Working class communities don't have a moment. LGBT communities don't have a moment. People need to step up right now. And that's not me blaming anyone in the room, though Tope might. If you're not ready to step up right now, I think people sometimes do need to look after themselves, or always need to look after themselves. But I think the hope actually is seeing how many people right now are going, I can't be a passive observer, even if politics hasn't been for me in the past. I'm ready to step up. I'm not waiting for the perfect model of the perfect party. I'm going to get involved with a party that's democratic, that's going places, and make sure that I change my community.
Thank you. Thank you. Zach, I'm going to have to ask you to, if we can make just shorter answers, because we've got so many people who have got their hands up.
I need easier questions.
Yeah, exactly. Victor, shall we come to you first? We'll come to your question first, because I know you haven't got at least 6 a.m. this morning that you've got a question to ask.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So please go ahead.
Zach, if you were elected tomorrow, well, as next Prime Minister, would you get rid of the triple lock? We're talking about the wealth gap and improving everybody's economic, if you will, situation. Given the fact that boomers, I'm not trying to single out boomers, but boomers are a disproportionate amount of boomers who are essentially wealthier than those coming up in society these days, younger people. Would you get rid of the triple lock?
It wouldn't be the first place I'd go, and I'll explain why. I think we could have an economic conversation about why we might need that money and why there's an unfairness to it. But I also think sometimes this narrative is driven, and I'm not suggesting you're doing this for a second. by the media by kind of creating intergenerational fighting, that we can either support younger people or we can support older people with their pensions. And my argument would be and I will be quick, we live in the 6th wealthiest economy in the world. 50 families in this country own more wealth than the bottom 50% of the nation. That's 50 families versus 34 million people. So actually, I really genuinely believe we can and should support both young people and pensioners. We don't need to create that intergenerational fighting.
The question
That's
is
not
how.
okay.
Triple lock does essentially, on the face of it, support pensioners more than it does younger people. So how can we do that? Support both?
Yeah, well, we can support both by making sure, first of all, that we're taxing the wealthy properly, both through a wealth tax, so we're taxing multimillionaires and billionaires, their assets, just charging them 1% or 2%, and I take the argument that's not enough, but let's start there. 1%, 2% could be raising between 12 to 14 billion pounds a year. Then there's bringing capital gains tax in line with income tax. The reason why that's important is right now we tax earned income more than we tax unearned wealth. That's one, unfair, but two, that's a way of generating wealth and money. There's lots of other ideas, charging national insurance on investment income, for instance. Right now, you could have a renter who is paying more in tax proportionally than the landlord who owns the building. Clearly ridiculous. You could be a cleaner cleaning a building who is paying more in tax proportionally than the person who owns the building. Again, ridiculous. So I think challenging the unfairness in the wealth system, both to generate money and arguably more important, to stop the hoarding of wealth, is already a way. Now, if you start to do that and then you get to a point where you go, we're really, really struggling here with this pensions bill, then yes, potentially there's a conversation in the future. But I think the first place we need to start when we live in such an unequal society is not pointing at young people or pointing at pensioners, but actually pointing at multimillionaires and billionaires.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Zack, for your time tonight. I really appreciate you coming down here and speaking to the people. So I guess my question is, in the first instance, I guess you would... it would be ideal for you to win the majority of the votes and then you get into Parliament and happy days, you're Prime Minister. In the second instance, we get a hung Parliament and a coalition needs to be formed. So who would be your most and least favourable parties to align with without naming any independent parties? Thank you.
So let me start with my boyfriend. And least is easy, reform, right? And there is no coalition happening in any circumstance with reform. Kemi Badenoch is clearly like that's a rule out as well. And frankly, Keir Starmer at this point is a rule out. This is a man who has wanted to cut disability benefits until he was shamed not to doing it. It took him 18 months to lift the child benefit cap, lifting hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty, but took 18 months. And we have seen him enable and be complicit in a genocide for the last few years. So that's not someone I could work with. I think it's difficult to answer what would a future Labour leader look like. I genuinely couldn't name a Labour leader that I think could win, that I could trust. I could name you Labour leaders that I could trust. So Nadia Whittome, for instance, I think is a brilliant MP. Clive Lewis, I think, is pretty sound. So, would he? You have to ask him, get him to Uppity. Give him the grilling. I mean, I chat to Labour MPs all the time, both formally and informally, and they could neither confirm or deny if Clive is on that list. I could tell you lots about Clive, though, so maybe you could work that out for yourself. So in terms of favourites, I think it would depend on who the leader was. I think quite seriously, too, it depends on where the votes go. So actually, I don't think it should be for any political leader to decide before an election. It will feel like a stitch-up if you say, I want to create this, depending on what the votes do at the end. I think you kind of have to look at where all the votes are and go, these are people I could work or not work with. I think the thing I can do to be completely transparent and accountable is lay out what your red lines are and lay out what your principles are. And that's something I've already started to do, but we'll definitely do even more of before the next general election.
Should we go to the gentleman over here again? Real quick questions.
Thank you. Point of blackness. Sure. Thank you very much. Point of blackness. Two things interrelated. First of all, what are your thoughts on how Wes and our Sir Fearless Keir are treating the BMA at this present moment in time? And secondly, if and should you win and become the Prime Minister, how would you ensure that the doctors of the UK feel that they need to stay in the UK?
We're assuming you're a doctor.
I am.
So clearly put an Asian man proud to What a stereotype. Surprise.
Because I'm giving short answers, I met with the BMA and spoke to them, and it's very, very obvious that people care about medical health professionals in this country. You'll know the stat better than I do, but up to 40% of NHS doctors are saying they're thinking about leaving the country based on a variety of reasons, but the state of the National Health Service, the state of pay, the state of where the country's going to. And so when journalists, particularly on the right, say to me, am I worried about multimillionaires and billionaires leaving? I say I'm actually a lot more worried about people who work for the NHS leaving, whether they're doctors, whether they're nurses, whether they're allied health professionals, or frankly the cleaners or whoever it is who works for the National Health Service. I think of the real creators in this country who are keeping our health service moving, which if we're going to come back to the economy, I want the health service to work for people's health, but even if your frame is just the economy, then we need the health service to work for the economy. In terms of how Wes Streeting and Keir Starmer are treating them, they're treating them like petulant children. They're basically saying, unless you give us exactly what we want, we're going to start threatening you with various things and we're going to throw our toys out the pram. It's not an adult negotiation. It's not treating people with the respect they deserve. And I would figure that if there really is going to be a showdown in this country between people who look after us when we're sick and look after our grandparents or our children versus two politicians who have taken money, particularly Wes Streeting, from private healthcare, I'm pretty sure who this country will stand with.
No, sorry. He'll have to come back. 7% battery.
Right, Russell. So I'm going to put my sister over here, please.
Points on blackness. Just 2 quick points.
One quick point. We've got 7% battery.
First one is that on the left, because there's such a small space, we tend to like messiah people that stand up, and then inevitably that people get let down. Like this is what we call like Obama, and there's like other examples. How would you counteract that? Because you can't please everybody. And the second point is we've talked a lot about equality, but sometimes people who chase equality forget about equal value. Because we might have equality, but we're not all equal value. Like, for example, a lot of us here might be British citizens, but if you're a British citizen with a foreign-born parent, you're not equal. So how would you counteract equality over equal value and also the cyanization of people on the left?
Yeah, so answer these quickly. The first one, my most honest answer is I don't have an answer, and I'll explain why. I went to a nightclub recently, Heaven nightclub, and we had a huge Green Party event. And I gave a speech where, I won't give the whole speech now, but if I was going to summarize it in 10 seconds, was don't think I'm coming to save you, get involved in your communities, work hard, let's save ourselves. I then jumped into the crowd to kind of go dance, and the DJ played We Need a Hero. And I was like, did you not hear anything I just said? Now, I'm not shading on the DJ. I think they were just playing a nice song. But I just thought it's so embedded in our culture that we need politicians to come and save us. So I don't have the answer to that, other than I keep saying it over and over again. Everywhere I go, I say it in this room, I say it to green local parties. I say it when I'm on TV and radio. Don't assume I'm going to save us, because I will trip up. Not because of some Machiavellian reason, but because I'll get a fact wrong, or I'll stumble, or sometimes my moral judgment won't be as sharp as I want it to be because there's a trade-off. Now, I'm not intending to do those things, but I'm a human being. I'm not pretending to be anything else. So I think the first thing is we need to make sure that we don't kind of messiah people. We've seen how that's worked in the past. It doesn't work. Zoran Mandani, I put him, super prime. He's disappointed people already, and I think there's legitimate or less legitimate reasons for that. I think some people are being unfair, but I also get it. But I think people put him on a pedestal so quick, that was always going to be the way it was, so we need to do communities together. In terms of equal value, I think that's totally legitimate, and I think it's about making sure in this country we're doing everything we can to empower people, no matter where their parents have come from, no matter what the colour of their skin, no matter whether a migrant, refugee. We really need to tackle this idea of working people. We always hear Labour going, working people. Well, what about people who are not working because they're disabled or have a long-term health condition? Or, just aren't working at the moment because they don't want to? I think we really need to have a conversation in the country about how do we see everyone's value and worth as a human being rather than based on any other characteristic.
I'm really sorry, guys. Sorry. Out of time. We're out of time. I'm so sorry. So sorry. No, Nels.
Final word to George. Final word to George.
No.
George, I was going to say, the reason I went with George has been to hell and back over the last 6 months, and I want to make sure George gets final speech. I apologise to everybody else. George, really quickly.
One question. I'm 21. I'm not a full-time member. I was looking at your manifesto, and I was looking specifically at your article just there's very flowery language around keeping public facilities open. There's very flowery language around, supporting councils and whatever, fund community projects. But in austerity around Britain, we've seen those spaces closed down, most of the class, parts are closed all over the place. There is nowhere for local people to connect to each other outside of going to a park or having to pay for organised activity. What is the Green Party doing to help that, especially with 16-year-olds now being able to vote? That's a group of voters who need public places to be able to come and meet people and organise with each other. What exactly are the Green Party doing?
Yeah, thank you, George. So I think the first thing is we hear, I was going to say right-wing politicians, but we hear it from Labour too. They say people don't integrate. I'm like, how do you expect people to integrate if you've closed down the spaces where people could eat, pray together, non-face spaces, or even disagree together, like in this room tonight? Because actually, if you don't create spaces like this, particularly for the community, where people don't have to pay, but actually nothing wrong with people. I'm really glad that people are here. But a free space, genuinely, in a community where people can disagree. Where does that conversation go? It goes on social media, becomes toxic, hate, divided. That fuels the algorithm, and it kind of leads to the society we're leading. Okay, the answer is to challenge austerity, not get there in the first place. Make sure we're investing in our community centres. So I'm sorry if you felt like it was flowery. Let me make it not flowery now. Let's make sure that every penny we can get from multimillionaires and billionaires goes straight back into our community centres, because they're the people who keep our cities and our country running, not people who are fleecing us or extracting money, power and wealth. And let's make sure we put power back where it belongs, into our communities.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of another Uppity. I apologise to people who feel like lynching me right now that they didn't get the opportunity. Particularly, I protect the politicians. Okay, pretty politicians you don't want to protect next time. Right, so thank you so much everybody for coming. Really grateful to you all.